My name is Sophia Voss, and the worst day of my life happened at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that tasted like stale coffee and broken promises. I was standing in the middle of Castellano and Associates' open office floor, 30 desks, 60 eyes, zero mercy. My boss, Richard Castellano, stood 5 feet away from me, his face the color of raw meat, his voice loud enough to crack the glass partition behind him. "You're incompetent. Worse than incompetent. You're a liability." My hands were shaking. I could feel them trembling at my sides, and I hated him for making me shake in front of everyone. I'd worked here for 4 years. 4 years of 70-hour weeks, of bringing his coffee the way he liked it, oat milk, 1 sugar, cinnamon, of swallowing his insults like vitamins. "Mr. Castellano, if you'd just let me explain." "Explain what? How you lost the Meridian account? How you cost us $5 million? His voice climbed higher. "Security. Get her out. Now." The security guard was already moving toward me, younger than me, uncomfortable in his uniform, not meeting my eyes. That was somehow worse than the shouting. I grabbed my bag from under my desk, the same bag I'd placed there that morning when everything was still normal, and felt the weight of the entire office watching me walk toward the elevator. Someone whispered. Someone else clicked on a browser tab quickly, like I wouldn't notice them already drafting an email about the scandal. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. That's when I saw him. He stood in the lobby, a man so deliberately still he seemed to absorb sound. Expensive coat, dark eyes that didn't reflect light the way normal eyes do. He was watching me step out of the elevator the way a predator watches prey that hasn't noticed it yet. Not with hunger, with certainty. "You just got fired," he said. Not a question. My mouth went dry. "I don't know who you are." "No, but you're about to." He extended his hand. His palm was warm, his grip careful like he was a loaded gun learning not to fire. There was a scar across his left knuckle, pale and deliberate. His suit was tailored in a way that cost more than my monthly rent. His cologne smelled like smoke and something darker. Oud, cedar, something that made my chest tighten without permission. "I'm Dante Moretti. Richard Castellano owes me money, an impressive amount." He paused. His eyes moved across my face like he was reading small print. "And I think you're the reason he can't pay it." My throat closed. "What? What?" "The Meridian account you lost. It wasn't an accident, was it? Richard made a bad bet. A very bad bet. With the wrong people, and now he's bleeding money and looking for someone to blame." I didn't answer because I couldn't. He was right. I'd learned 3 days ago that Richard had taken the Meridian money, my client's money, the account I'd nursed into being over 18 months, and invested it in something he wouldn't discuss. When the investment collapsed, he'd blamed me for mismanaging the relationship. He'd blamed me for everything. "You're dangerous to him now," Dante said quietly. "You know something. Maybe you don't realize it, but you do. And he'll need you silenced." That's insane. But even as I said it, I was thinking about the locked drawer in his office, the phone calls he took in the hallway with his voice pitched low, the men who visited after hours, men with the same kind of stillness this man had. "Is it?" Dante released my hand, but his eyes stayed on mine. "Then why did my people find surveillance footage of the Moretti family being photographed outside your apartment complex last Thursday?" The air went cold, very cold. The kind of cold that comes from understanding you've been standing at the edge of a cliff without realizing it. "I don't..." My voice broke. I cleared my throat. "I don't know what you want from me. I want you to tell me what Richard has, the account details, the money transfer, anything. Give me a reason to believe you're not part of this. And if I can't?" Dante's smile was a blade. "Then you're very much in danger, Sophia Voss. And I'll have to keep you that way. On my terms, where I can see you." He took me to a townhouse in Brooklyn, Williamsburg, the kind of place that announces old money through the careful absence of trying. 4 stories, a garden gate, windows with the blinds permanently closed. Inside, there was a man waiting older, scarred, built like a vault door. His name was Vincent, and he showed me to a room on the 3rd floor without speaking. The room was beautiful. That was the worst part. It had a window overlooking the garden, a bed with white sheets that probably cost more than my car payment, a bathroom with marble that made you want to disappear into it. A gilded cage looks the same from the inside as the outside. You're still trapped. I sat on the edge of the bed as the sun set, and I tried to think of a way out of this that didn't involve dying or becoming part of a story I never signed up for. My phone had died somewhere between the office and Brooklyn. I'd been too numb to charge it. too numb to do anything but exist in the space between what I'd lost and whatever I was about to lose next. There was a knock at the door at 8 p.m. Dante entered with a tray. Soup, bread, tea. He set it on the dresser without looking at me. "You're not a prisoner," he said. "There's a lock on the door, but it's for privacy, not captivity. I'm locked in a strange house by a man I don't know. That's literally the definition of being a prisoner. Fair." He moved to the window, his silhouette cutting through the purple-gray light. "But you're alive. That matters. Why do you care?" I heard the anger in my voice and was grateful for it. Anger was better than fear. Anger meant I could still think. "Why not just kill me? Isn't that what your kind does?" He turned. For a moment, his face was completely unguarded. Young. Tired. Like he'd been holding something too heavy for too long. "Because," he said quietly, "Richard Castellano took something from me 2 years ago. Not money. A person. My sister. She was supposed to testify against him. She disappeared 3 days before the trial." His jaw tightened. His hands became fists. Then, deliberately, he released them. "You might be the only person alive who can help me find her. And I'll burn the city down to protect you until you remember everything you know." He left before I could respond. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in that perfect bed, listening to the city breathe outside the window, and understood the moment you go from having a normal life to having no life at all is often the moment you're not paying attention. It sneaks up. It doesn't announce itself. It just changes the math of everything. Morning came gray and reluctant. I woke to the smell of coffee, real coffee. Not the office swill I'd been drinking for 4 years. Someone had slipped a cup under the door while I was still asleep. Dante. Had to be. I drank it anyway. By the second day, I'd started to notice the pattern of the house. Dante left at dawn. Returned around noon. Disappeared again by evening. Vincent stayed in the kitchen. Another man, younger, with a neck tattoo that looked like a bird being strangled, paced the hallway outside my room. Watching. Always watching. On the third day, I asked Dante to sit down. We were in the study. Dark wood, books that looked like they'd never been opened. A globe in the corner that was probably worth more than my entire life. He hesitated, then sat in the chair across from me, like I might suddenly produce a weapon. "Your sister," I said. "Tell me about her." Something flickered across his face. Relief, maybe. Or something closer to pain. Her name was Lucia. She was 23. She worked in Richard's office as a paralegal. That's how she found out about the money laundering, the offshore accounts, the connection to the Russo family. He paused. His hands were very still. She wanted to do the right thing. She came to me, asked me to help her go to the police. "And did you?" I told her to wait. I told her it was dangerous. I told her I could handle it alone. His voice was flat, fact-based. Like he'd told this story so many times he'd worn the emotion out of it. 2 weeks later, she was gone. I understood what he wasn't saying. Gone. Not missing. Not running away. Gone in the way that meant no phone calls, no postcards, no accidental sightings in cafes or on the street. "I'm sorry," I said. He didn't acknowledge it. "You worked with Richard for 4 years. You handled his files, his clients, his money. You must have seen something." And I had. Of course I had. I'd seen enough to know something was wrong. I'd just been very good at not looking directly at it. "There was a folder," I said slowly, "in his private safe. He made me retrieve it once when his hands were full. I only saw it for a few seconds, but it had photographs of..." I stopped. The faces came back to me suddenly. Men, women, the kind of photographs you take when you want to own someone. Collateral. Dante leaned forward. "Names? I don't remember. I wasn't supposed to see it." He realized what had happened, and I could feel his hand on my shoulder, could remember the pressure of it, the warning in that grip. He told me if I ever mentioned it, I'd disappear the same way his last 3 assistants had. Did he say their names? No. But I heard him on the phone once. He was talking to someone named Russo. He said, "The girls are secured. The insurance is secure. No one talks." When Dante stood, the movement was so sudden that I flinched. He moved to the window. His hand pressed against the glass like he was trying to push through to another world. "That's him. That's the connection," he said quietly. "Russo. He's the one who took Lucia." "Why would Richard?" "Because Russo owns him. Because Richard made a deal with the devil. And the devil collects payment in blood and silence." He turned back to me, His eyes were black in the gray light. And because you were getting too close to understanding it. That afternoon, Dante brought me to another room, the second floor, a library that smelled like leather and dust and old secrets. He showed me a file, not the one from Richard's safe, but something different. Photographs, documents. A timeline written in red ink on white paper, marked with dates and question marks. "This is what I know," he said. "This is what I've been building for 2 years. And this is where you come in." The photographs were of women. 7 of them. Different ages, different ethnicities. Same look in their eyes, that particular absence that comes from understanding you'll never leave a room again. "Your sister?" I asked, though I didn't want the answer. He pointed to a photograph in the center. Dark hair, young, smiling in the way you smile for a family photo when you don't yet know what the world wants from you. Lucia Moretti had her brother's eyes, that same capacity for intensity, that same particular gravity. "We're going to find her," I said. You're going to tell me everything you know, and then we're going to find the people who took her, and we're going to burn them until they burn back." There was no darkness in his voice when he said it. That was what frightened me most. There was just certainty. I spent the next 8 hours going through documents. Lucia's file, Richard's financial records that Vincent had somehow acquired, the photographs of collateral. I wrote out everything I could remember. Names, account numbers, meeting details overheard through the office walls. By sunset, I'd created a map of a criminal enterprise that made my stomach hurt. Around midnight, I found Dante on the roof. I'd been looking for the bathroom. The hallway was long and dark and confusing, and instead found a door to the outside. He stood at the edge with a cigarette, looking out at the Brooklyn skyline like it belonged to him personally. "You shouldn't be up here," he said without turning around. "Neither should you. Isn't that what snipers are for? Snipers work for the Russo family. I'm trying to make it unwise for them to use the skyline." He took a drag. "The scar on my hand? That was from the last time I turned my back on them. Now I don't turn my back on anything." I stood beside him. Not too close. Close enough to feel the heat of him, the deliberate stillness that meant he was choosing not to move. "Your sister," I said. "If we find her, if she's—" I couldn't finish it. "Then I'll kill everyone responsible," he said simply, "including your former boss. Is that justice?" "No. Justice is a luxury that belongs to people who still believe in the law." He flicked ash into the wind. "This is vengeance. This is keeping my family safe. This is making sure it happens again to no one else." I should have been frightened. I should have walked back inside and locked the door and called someone for help. Instead, I realized I wanted to help him burn it all down. 3 weeks changed the shape of my life in ways I didn't anticipate. The townhouse became a headquarters of sorts. More men came and went. There was strategy. There were conversations in Italian that I pretended not to understand but did. 3 years of my mother's heritage finally useful for something other than ordering coffee in her hometown. Dante taught me how to notice things, how to read a room, how to understand what someone wanted by watching their hands instead of their face. We'd sit in the library, and he'd show me techniques for memory, how to photograph a moment in your mind, how to recall it later with precision that felt like time travel. "Why are you training me?" I asked on a Wednesday afternoon. "Because you're going to help me get inside Russo's organization, and because you need to know how to survive if this goes wrong. And when it goes wrong, if it goes wrong, you know how to disappear. We have passports, money, safe houses in 3 countries. The precision of that plan was somehow more comforting than I expected. But here's what I didn't anticipate. Proximity changes things. I started noticing the small details. The way Dante moved through the house like he was always already gone. The way his hands shook slightly when he reviewed the file with his sister's photograph, just barely. Just enough to tell me the control was costing him something. The way he took his coffee without sugar, then added one anyway when he thought no one was watching. A small softness in an architecture of hardness. One afternoon, Vincent brought news. We were in the study, Dante, myself, Vincent, and another man named Paolo, who'd arrived from Sicily 3 days earlier. Vincent held up his phone. "They moved again," he said in Italian. "The warehouse on Linden. We have a window of maybe 6 hours before they reposition." Dante's entire body changed. It was like watching a lock snap shut. Every softness I'd begun to recognize disappeared. "Tell the crew. We leave in 30 minutes. "Not without me," I said. "Yes, without you. You need someone on the inside. Someone they trust. Someone expendable?" His voice had that knife-edge quality. That's not happening. Then what was all of this for? I stood up. My legs were shaking. The training? The files? The passports? Was it just to keep me busy? To keep me docile? It was to keep you alive. I don't want to be kept safe by someone else's courage. Not anymore. I saw something shift behind his eyes. A recognition, maybe. That I understood what this was costing him, not just the danger, but the wanting to protect someone and having that person refuse to stay protected. You go with Vincent's team, he said finally. You stay outside the location. If anything feels wrong, you leave. You don't ask questions, you don't debate, you just vanish. Understood? I nodded. He stepped closer. His hand came up to my face, and I thought for a moment he was going to touch me. Instead, he just held it there, 2 inches away from my skin, the air between us charged with something that wasn't quite safe. If you die, I burn the world, he said quietly, and that will make everything worse. So don't die. The warehouse was in Red Hook, industrial, the kind of place where screams don't carry. Vincent's team was 3 men and me. I wore a wire, something small and sophisticated that fit behind my ear. I could hear Dante's voice in my right ear, calm and precise, giving directions, surveillance positions, escape routes, the kind of operational language that made me understand. He'd done this before, many times, with stakes much higher than mine. We arrived at 9 p.m. The warehouse doors were open. Inside, I could hear voices. Vincent positioned me by a window, dirty glass, broken blind. I could see into the main floor. There were boxes. There were also people, 5 of them. And then the door opened, and Richard walked in. My blood went cold. He looked thinner, worn, like something had been eating him from the inside. Where is she? He demanded. You said you had the girl. You said she could be used for leverage. A man turned, tall, scars visible even in the dark warehouse. This had to be Russo. Richard, relax. She's secure. She's being held with the others. I want her gone. I want all of this gone. Richard's voice was desperate, pleading. I came to you with nothing. I asked for help. I never asked for 4 people to disappear. I never asked for murder. But that's what happens, Russo said softly. When you work for me, people disappear, people die. That's the price of my help. And you agreed to that price when you signed onto my organization. My sister didn't agree. She was innocent. My breath stopped. Richard. Russo stepped closer. Your sister was a liability. She knew too much. She was going to talk, so she's not a liability anymore. She's an asset. She's leverage. She's useful. She's also very much alive. And she'll stay alive as long as you do exactly what I tell you. The wire crackled. Dante's voice was very careful, very controlled in my ear. Did you get that? I pressed the button once. Yes. Team Able. You're cleared to move. Team Bravo. Wait for my signal. What happened next happened very fast. The warehouse door exploded inward. Dante was suddenly everywhere, moving through the space with a kind of terrible grace. His movements precise and economical. Vincent took Russo down with force that sounded like thunder. Richard tried to run for the back exit, but Paolo was already there. I watched through the window as Dante's hands moved. I watched as he extracted information from Russo's body, using nothing but leverage and pressure, and the kind of personal hatred that comes from losing someone permanently. I watched as Russo screamed, and I realized that the man I'd been living with for 3 weeks, the one who made coffee at dawn and trained me in memory techniques and held his hand 2 inches from my face like I was something sacred, was also capable of things that would haunt me. The wire crackled. Sophia, time to move. Now. I moved. They found Lucia in a sublevel beneath a brownstone in Sunset Park. I wasn't there for that. I was in a safe house in Astoria, watching the news coverage of what they were calling a major NYPD raid on suspected human trafficking operation. The headlines didn't mention names, didn't mention that someone had coordinated with the police to make sure the legal process would move forward, didn't mention that Dante Moretti had, in a very real sense, won. He came to get me at 3 a.m. Your apartment, he said. We're going to need your cooperation to press charges against Castellano. The DA wants to see you. They want you to testify. I was still in the clothes from the warehouse, dirty, contaminated with dust that probably contained evidence of crimes I didn't understand. What about Lucia? In the hospital. Stable. She's asking for you. That stopped me. Me? Why? Because you helped find her. Because you're the first kind voice she's heard in 2 years. The hospital was bright and terrible. Lucia lay in a private room that Dante had clearly paid for with the kind of money that bypasses normal hospital procedures. She was smaller than her photographs. Hollowed out. The kind of small that comes from understanding that no one is coming to save you. Her eyes tracked to Dante first, then to me. "You helped," she said. Her voice was paper thin. "Yes, he told me." She reached for my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "He said you were brave." He doesn't usually say that about people. I looked at Dante, who was standing by the window with his back to us. His shoulders were very tight. "He made it easy," I said. "He had a plan. I just helped with the details." "No." Lucia's eyes were clearer than I expected. More present. "He had obsession. You gave him something else. You gave him a reason to do this the right way, instead of the blood-soaked way." Dante didn't move, didn't acknowledge her words. But his hand, resting against the window frame, slowly became a fist. Testifying was the strangest act of honesty I've ever performed. The DA was a woman named Keller with gray eyes and an expression that suggested she'd heard too many lies to believe in anything good. I told her everything. The files, the photographs, the conversations I'd overheard. The moment in the warehouse when I understood Richard Castellano had helped traffic human beings to consolidate his power. "We have physical evidence from the warehouse," Keller said. "We have victims willing to testify. We have recordings from your wire that corroborate your account. Castellano is going to prison for a very long time." It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the moment when you realize the story isn't over. It's just entering a different chapter, one where the consequences ripple out in ways you can't control. Russo's family came looking for revenge exactly 1 week later. The first attack was on the brownstone in Williamsburg, gunfire at dawn. Nothing critical. Vincent took 2 bullets that caught his shoulder, but enough to be a message, enough to be a threat. Dante moved me to a different location, then another. A penthouse in Tribeca that was too modern and too exposed. A house in New Jersey that smelled like mold and previous violence. He became different in those days. Sharper, more dangerous. Less interested in sleep or rest or any of the small gentlenesses I'd started to associate with him. "We have to move against them," Paolo argued during a late-night strategy session I wasn't supposed to be listening to. "We have to be proactive." "No." Dante's voice was quiet. "We do that, and this becomes a war. Wars have casualties. We already are at war. We're at a negotiation. There's a difference." But I could feel the pressure building. The organization that had started as a rescue operation was becoming something else. It was becoming a machine designed for retaliation, and I was becoming a problem. Dante said it himself one night when he didn't think I was awake. He was on the phone in the next room. His voice was low, controlled. "She's a witness. Yes. She's essential to the case. No, I can't just..." He paused, listened. "Because I can't. Because the moment I let her go is the moment Russo decides she's expendable. And because..." He stopped. "Because you care for her," the voice on the phone said. I could hear it clearly through the wall. "That's not relevant." "It absolutely is. It means you're thinking like a civilian instead of like a man trying to survive. And that's a liability." When Dante hung up, I pretended to be asleep. I lay in the dark and understood that we'd reached the moment where protection and possession become the same thing, where he was keeping me safe and keeping me prisoner, and those two realities were becoming indistinguishable. I needed to decide what I wanted. I needed to decide if I was going to stay, or if I was going to run. The attack came on a Thursday during afternoon rain. We were in a safe house in Flushing, a nondescript apartment above a restaurant that made dumplings. Dante had gone to meet with some of his people. I was alone with a man named Marcus, who was ostensibly security but was really a jailer, however polite he tried to be. The window exploded inward. I knew enough by then to hit the ground. I knew enough to move toward the interior wall. I knew enough to be terrified with the kind of clean, sharp terror that comes from understanding you're about to die. Marcus returned fire. The apartment became a thunder of sound. I crawled toward the bedroom, Dante's instructions echoing in my head like muscle memory. "Move. Get to the safe room. Don't look back." The safe room was a closet that opened into the apartment next door. I was halfway through it when hands grabbed me. For one perfect, crystalline second, I thought I was finished. Then I recognized the cologne. Oud, cedar, that particular darkness that now meant safety. Dante pulled me through the opening, kicked the wall shut behind us. His entire front was covered in blood, none of it his. I realized after a moment when I saw his hands were steady and his breathing controlled. "Marcus," I asked. Fine. They're extracting him. We're leaving. The next door opened to a stairwell. We moved down fast, my hand in his other hand holding a gun I hadn't seen him draw. The back exit led to an alley. A car was idling there. Vincent was in the driver's seat. We were moving before the door was fully closed. Russo's getting bolder, Paolo said. We were in a new location, now a warehouse by the East River, that had belonged to the organization for years. He's using more soldiers. He's moving more openly. He doesn't care about subtlety anymore. Because he's running out of time, Dante said quietly. We're building a case. The DA moves forward with prosecution in 2 weeks. Once that happens, some of his leverage disappears. Not if Sofia disappears. Someone said I wasn't paying attention enough to see who. The room went quiet. Dante's head turned. His eyes found the speaker and held contact until the man looked away. If anything happens to her, I burn everything. I burn the case. I burn Russo. I burn this entire city if I have to. We clear on that? No one argued, but I understood what I was costing him. I understood that I'd become the thing that could break him. And I understood that he knew it too, and he didn't care. I found him on the roof that night. It was becoming a pattern, me finding him at the edges of spaces, him not pushing me away. The rain had stopped. The city smelled clean and impossible. He was smoking again. Something he did when he was thinking too hard. You're going to have to let me go, I said. He didn't react. No, you can't keep me in a warehouse. You can't keep hiding me. At some point, you have to acknowledge that I'm making you vulnerable, and vulnerable means people die. They're already dying. He took a drag. The only difference is whether they die for a reason. That's not a reason. That's an excuse. I stepped closer. My heart was doing something it shouldn't do. I care about what happens to you, which is insane because you're a criminal and I'm a person you kidnapped, but I do. And because I care, I'm not going to let you burn everything to protect me. He turned. His face was sharp in the city light, exhausted. There were cuts I hadn't noticed before on his left cheekbone. His eyes were the color of graphite. You think you have a choice, he said quietly. I know I do. I could walk. Right now. You wouldn't stop me. No, he agreed. I wouldn't stop you. Because I'm not the villain in the story you're telling yourself. But I am a man who's lost everything. And you're the closest thing I have to something worth keeping. The admission hung between us like humidity. That's not love, I said. No. It's something more dangerous. It's obsession. It's the understanding that you're the last good thing in a life full of necessary violence. It's the certainty that losing you would be worse than losing my sister again. He stepped closer. His hand came up that same movement from weeks ago, 2 inches away from my skin, the air between us charged. I know what that makes me. I know what that makes this. And I'm asking you to stay anyway. Why would I? His hand moved the 2 inches. His palm came against my cheek, and I realized I'd been waiting for this contact since the moment he touched my hand in the Castellano and Associates lobby. Because you're not looking for a good man, he said softly. You're looking for a true one. And I'm the only true thing left in this city. I turned my face into his palm. His hand was warm, shaking slightly. This ends with you in prison, I said. I know. Or dead. I know. And you still. Yes. Absolutely yes. When he kissed me, it wasn't the cinematic moment I might have imagined. It was desperate and careful at the same time. It was the kiss of someone who understood they were about to lose everything, and was trying to memorize the exact pressure of my mouth against his. It was tender in a way that made me want to cry because there was nothing tender left in either of our lives except this. When he pulled away, his breathing was uneven. I'm going to finish this, he said. The case goes forward. Russo goes to prison, or dies. Castellano goes to prison. And then what? Then I go to prison. Because there are things I've done that are going to be exposed in the process of exposing them. How long? 15 years. Maybe more. I leaned against him, my forehead against his chest. I could feel his heartbeat fast, irregular, human. Okay, I said. Okay? Okay. We do it your way. We finish what we started, and then we figure out the rest. His arms came around me. He held me like I was the only solid thing in a dissolving world. I love you, he said quietly. I'm not equipped to love anyone. I'm a dangerous man, but I love you. I didn't answer. I just held on. The next morning, everything changed. The police arrived with warrants, but not for Dante. For me, Sofia Voss, the detective said, standing in the warehouse with 2 uniformed officers. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, and accessory after the fact." I looked at Dante. His face was absolutely still. "They can't prove anything," he said to the detective. "She was a victim. She was coerced." "Is that true, Miss Voss?" the detective asked. This was the moment. This was the crux. If I said yes, if I claimed coercion, the case against Russo would fracture, the leverage would shift, everything we'd built would become a story of manipulation instead of justice. "No," I said, "it's not true. I chose this, all of it." "Then you need to come with us." They put handcuffs on me. The metal was cold. The walk to the police car felt ceremonial. Dante didn't try to stop them if he had. It would have been the signal for everything to collapse into violence. Instead, he just watched me leave with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. Fear. The interrogation room was gray and small, and smelled like copper and desperation. Detective Morrison was tall, tired, the kind of man who'd seen too many lives destroyed by too many crimes to think anyone was truly innocent. "Walk me through it," he said. "From the beginning." So I did. I told him everything. The firing, Dante in the lobby, the townhouse, the training, the warehouse raid. I told him about the wire and the surveillance and the way Dante's hands shook when he looked at his sister's photograph. "You're protecting him," Morrison said when I finished. "No, I'm telling you the truth. The truth about a man who kidnapped you, held you against your will, and used you as a tool in his vendetta against another criminal. The truth about a man who saved my life when it would have been easier to let me die. The truth about someone who was willing to go to prison to protect me. The truth about a human being who made a choice between being destroyed by what happened to him and being someone who destroys others in return." Morrison leaned back. "That's love. That's not justice. Maybe they're the same thing sometimes. They're not." He stood. "Here's what's going to happen. We're going to charge you. The DA will offer you a plea deal, probably a year, maybe 18 months, suspended pending your cooperation. You take that deal, you testify, and you disappear. You start over. You get a normal life. And if I don't take the deal, then we prosecute. You go to prison. Moretti goes to prison. Everyone goes to prison. And Richard Castellano laughs because his organization fractures and rebuilds under someone worse." I understood the choice. I understood that the moral clarity I'd felt weeks ago, the sense that we were fighting for something right, had become complicated by the fact that we'd also broken laws and hurt people and crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. "Can I talk to Dante?" I asked. "No. They kept me in a holding cell for 18 hours. I was alone except for a woman named Rita, who'd been arrested for shoplifting and spent 6 hours telling me about her grandchildren before they took her to processing. I sat on the bench and tried to think through the calculus of consequence. If I testify, Russo goes away, but so does Dante. If I don't testify, I go to prison anyway, and Russo remains a threat forever. The only winning move was the one that cost Dante everything. When they finally let me out, he was waiting in the lobby. His hands were on the table, very still. His face was composed, but I could see the cracks in the composition, the way his jaw was too tight, the way his breathing was shallow, the way he'd aged 5 years in 18 hours. "They offered you a deal," he said. "Not a question." "Yes, you're taking it, Dante. You're taking it," he repeated. "You're testifying. You're walking away from this, and you're never looking back." I sat down across from him. Through the glass dividers, I could see lawyers and defendants and the particular desperation that comes from understanding the law has decided what you're worth. "I'm not leaving you," I said quietly. "You are. Because if you don't, then everything I did, everything I became was for nothing. I became a criminal to save my sister. I became a criminal to protect you. I can live with the prison time. I can live with the violence. What I can't live with is you rotting in a cell because of me. That's not your decision. Actually, it is." His eyes came up to meet mine. "I'm confessing to everything. The warehouse raid, the interrogation of Russo, all of it. I'm telling them that I coordinated with specific police officers to conduct an illegal raid. I'm giving them everything they need to put me away for 20 years instead of 15. No. Yes. Because that way you look like the victim. That way you don't go to prison. That way, you walk out of here, and you live the life you were supposed to live before I ruined it. You didn't ruin it. You saved it. No. I corrupted it. I made you complicit. I made you a criminal." His voice was very steady, very final. "I'm taking that back. I'm erasing your involvement. You're going to testify as a victim, and you're going to walk away clean. Dante, please." His hand came across the table. For one moment, I thought he might touch me. Instead, he just held it there, 2 inches away from my face. That same gesture from the roof, that same charged silence. "I love you," he said. "That's why I'm doing this. That's the last true thing I'm going to do, and you're going to let me." Then he pulled his hand back, and the visitation was over. The trial lasted 6 weeks. I testified on day 3. I told the story of my firing, of Dante in the lobby, of being taken to the townhouse. I described the photographs of victims. I described the warehouse. I described the moment when Dante's hands moved and a man screamed. The prosecution asked careful questions. The defense tried to paint me as a willing participant, someone complicit from the beginning, someone who developed a romantic attachment to a dangerous man. I didn't argue with them. I just answered the questions with the kind of precision Dante had taught me. By the time I stepped down from the stand, Russo was going to prison regardless. The physical evidence from the warehouse was enough. The testimony from Lucia and the other victims was enough. My account was just confirmation. What changed everything was Dante's testimony on day 21. He took the stand in an expensive suit that emphasized how dangerous he was. He spoke quietly. He answered every question with the kind of clarity that seemed almost innocent if you didn't understand that every statement was a brick in a wall he was building around his own cell. "Mr. Moretti?" the prosecution asked. "Did you plan and execute a raid on a warehouse in Red Hook on March 14th? "Yes." "Without authorization from law enforcement?" "Yes." "Did you use force against Victor Russo during that raid?" "Yes." "Did you break multiple federal laws in the course of these actions?" "Yes." It was a masterclass in confession. He took every accusation, every crime, every moment of violence, and made it his own. He moved the blame away from me with surgical precision, but then the defense attorney asked the question that broke him. "Mr. Moretti, at any point during your actions against Victor Russo and his organization, did you consider the consequences for Sophia Voss?" Dante's hands stilled. Something flickered behind his eyes. The armor cracked just slightly. "Every moment," he said quietly. "I considered the consequences for her every moment." "And you proceeded anyway?" "Yes." "Why?" There was a long pause. The kind of pause that meant he was choosing which truth to tell. There were so many truths, all of them dangerous. Because she was in danger whether I acted or not. Because her former employer was going to have her eliminated as soon as the Russo family understood she was a threat to their operation. Because staying still meant watching her die slowly. Acting meant I might be able to save her. He paused. And because once I met her, once I understood what she was, I couldn't afford to lose her. Is that a romantic attachment? No. It's existential. It's the understanding that there are some things more important than your own survival. For me, that thing is her safety. The jury convicted him on 17 counts. The judge sentenced him to 22 years. When they took him out of the courtroom, he didn't look back at me. He just walked out with his hands in front of him, understanding that everything he'd wanted to give me, protection, safety, a future, was now being paid for in decades of solitary. Lucia found me on the courthouse steps. She looked better. Color in her cheeks, real clothes instead of hospital garments. But there was still that hollowness, that sense that she'd been fundamentally altered by what happened to her. "He did this for you," she said simply. "He did this for all of us. For you. For the other women." "No." She shook her head. "He did this for you. He understood that as long as he was free and moving and dangerous, you were a target. He understood that the only way to keep you safe was to put himself away. So he did. That's not love. That's obsession. In his life, they're the same thing." She took my hand. Her grip was strong. "Dante's never been good at normal love. He's only ever been good at devotion. He loves like a religion completely, with no room for doubt. When he decides you're sacred, he'll burn down the world to keep you safe. What am I supposed to do with that? Survive, testify, disappear, live the life he bought for you. And then what? Then you wait for him. Or you don't. But either way, you live. You don't waste the price he paid." The prosecution offered me the deal after the verdict. They were clear about what it meant. Immunity from prosecution, in exchange for my testimony and cooperation. A fresh start. A new life. The gift of erasure. I took it. The paperwork was signed in an office that smelled like coffee and other people's desperation. I walked out of the courthouse, a free woman not quite cleared, not quite vindicated, but free in the way that mattered. Free to leave, free to forget, free to move on. For exactly 2 days, I tried. I rented an apartment in Crown Heights. I got a job at a legal services nonprofit. I made coffee every morning and took walks in Prospect Park and tried to convince myself that this was what freedom felt like. On the third night, I couldn't sleep. I was lying in bed in an apartment that wasn't mine, thinking about a man in a prison cell who'd made the choice to destroy himself to save me, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, unknown message. But I recognized the format. It was the way Dante had taught me to encode information. Federal Corrections Facility, maximum security, visiting hours 2 to 4 p.m. on Saturdays. Ask for inmate 47291. Tell them you're his sister. They'll let you see him. I didn't sleep that night. I got on a bus at 6 a.m. I drove upstate. I arrived at the facility at 1:30 p.m. The guard at the desk recognized me. He knew you'd come, he said. Did he? He said that love was either everything or nothing. And in his life, it had to be everything. They took me to a visiting room. Bulletproof glass, 2 phones. A man in a gray prison uniform, Dante. He looked smaller. Not because he'd gotten smaller, but because the space around him was designed to diminish anyone. He picked up the phone. You came, he said. You didn't think I would? I hoped. But hope is a dangerous thing for men like me. Dante, I'm so sorry. Don't. His voice was firm but not unkind. Don't apologize for taking the deal. Don't apologize for living. Don't apologize for being the thing that made me want to be better, and then for accepting the cost of that becoming. How long until you can appeal? The legal process takes time. Years, probably. But I'm not interested in leaving early. He pressed his palm against the glass. I'm interested in serving my time. I'm interested in being the kind of man who can stand in front of you and know that at least one of my choices was clean. I'll wait, I said. I know. That's the terrifying part. The violence came 6 months later, and it came from an unexpected direction. Russo's family didn't accept his conviction. Instead, they decided to retaliate against the people who'd put him away. They targeted Lucia first. The attack happened outside her apartment in Park Slope. A car jumped the curb. She was taken to the hospital with a shattered femur and internal bleeding that required emergency surgery. The doctors said she was lucky. I understood what they meant. Luck was the only thing keeping her alive. I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, drinking coffee that tasted like medicine, when Vincent found me. Dante wants you to run, he said without preamble. He's got money. Passports. We can have you out of the country by tomorrow. No, Sophia, no, I'm not running. Lucia's not running. We're done hiding. Vincent's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Understanding that I'd become something other than a civilian, other than a person who could be protected. Then we retaliate, he said quietly. I should have argued. I should have insisted on legal means, proper channels, the rule of law. Instead, I understood that the rule of law had failed Lucia. It had failed Dante. It failed everyone who didn't have the right kind of connections. How? I asked. It took 2 weeks to plan. 2 weeks of meeting with Dante's network men and women who'd continued his work after he went to prison. 2 weeks of understanding that his organization hadn't died with his incarceration. It had just become quieter, more distributed, more dangerous because it no longer had a face to project outward. I was part of planning the response. I helped identify the men responsible for the attack on Lucia. I helped gather intelligence on their movements, their families, their vulnerabilities. I became complicit in a way that made my earlier involvement look quaint, and I understood why Dante had done what he'd done. It wasn't virtue. It was necessity. It was the understanding that sometimes the only way to protect someone is to become the very thing you're protecting them from. The response came on a Saturday night. I didn't participate directly, Vincent was firm about that, but I was in a safe house with Lucia, watching it unfold on a secured feed that Vincent provided. I watched as Dante's people moved against Russo's remaining operations. I watched violence unfold with surgical precision. No deaths, that was Dante's instruction. Apparently. One thing he'd insisted on from prison, but there was permanent damage. There was the understanding that the cost of hurting Lucia had been calculated and would be paid in full. When it was over, Vincent came to see me. It's done, he said. Russo's family understands that the cost of continued retaliation exceeds any benefit. At what cost? 2 of our people were injured, nothing permanent. And you're now potentially liable for conspiracy to assault, which is why Dante insists you need to run. Lucia will recover. And then she'll also run. You're going to take the passports. You're going to disappear for a year, maybe 2, until the statute of limitations protects you or the evidence gets too cold for prosecution. I thought about Dante in his cell, making the calculation that my freedom was worth more than his. And I understood that this was the moment to make the same calculation about myself. Okay, I said. Set it up. I saw Dante one more time before I left. The visiting room was the same. The bulletproof glass was the same. But he was different. He'd gained weight, prison weight, the kind that comes from systematic exercise rather than nourishment. His eyes were harder. But when he saw me, something in that hardness cracked. You did it, he said. Vincent told me. You helped them. You violated the immunity agreement. I did what needed to be done. Now you're going to have to leave. Yes. His hand came up to the glass. I matched it from my side, the barrier between us turning his palm into a photograph of a hand, something I could see but not feel. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I wanted to protect you from this. I wanted your hands to stay clean. They were never going to stay clean. Not in this world. Not with you. I pressed my palm harder against the glass. And I don't want to stay clean. I want to stay alive. I want to be with you. And that means I have to leave for a while. How long? 18 months probably, until the evidence gets too cold. Then I disappear into a new identity, and you serve your time, and we figure out what comes after. That's not a life. That's limbo. It's the life we earned when we decided to burn things down instead of letting them burn us. I could feel tears starting but refused to let them finish. I'm going to Lisbon first, then Barcelona, then somewhere small and quiet, and I'm going to wait. And when you get out, it'll be years. I don't get out for 14 more years at minimum. Then I'll wait 14 years. I'll wait however long I need to wait. Dante's jaw tightened. You deserve better than this. I deserve whatever I'm willing to fight for. And I'm willing to fight for you. We sat like that with our hands pressed against the glass, the barrier between us, a metaphor for everything we'd lost and everything we were still trying to hold on to. The guard finally told me visiting hours were over. As I stood to leave, Dante spoke one more time. I meant what I said in the courtroom, he said. You're the only sacred thing in my life. And I'll wait. I'll serve my time. I'll become whatever I need to become, so that when I get out, I'm worthy of the woman who waited for me. I didn't answer. I just held his gaze until the room between us became too large to bridge, with anything except faith. Barcelona was beautiful in a way that almost hurt. The city accepted me without questions. No one knew me. No one knew the woman I'd been. I found a small apartment in Gracia with a balcony overlooking the street, and I became someone new. Sofia, Spanish. A woman with a quiet life and expensive shoes paid for by money that probably shouldn't have existed. I got a job at an international law firm, legitimate work, completely legal, the kind of normalcy that felt like a costume. I made friends with other expatriates. I learned to order coffee in Catalan. I existed in the way that people exist when they're deliberately trying to disappear. Every Saturday, I visited an internet cafe and checked a secure email address. Dante's messages came sporadically, months apart sometimes, but they always came. They were never long, never romantic in the way that love letters are supposed to be. They were just observations, updates. The internal monologue of a man trying to survive imprisonment by pretending he was still the person he'd been before bars became a permanent feature of his landscape. Month 3. The gym is good. Routine helps. I think of you doing normal things and it feels like watching a movie I'll never be part of. Month 7. Lucia visited. She's walking without a cane now. She said you sent money. You shouldn't have. You need it more than we do. Month 14. A man tried to hurt someone in the yard. It reminded me that violence is a language I still speak fluently, even in a cage. I don't like what that means about who I am. Month 22. I read about your firm winning a case against a landlord who was exploiting immigrant tenants. That's you. That's the person you became. I'm proud in a way that feels dangerous. And then, in month 28. Month 28. I'm being released early. Good behavior. Cooperation with federal investigators. 15 years reduced to 8. I get out in 3 weeks. I don't know what you want me to do. I read it 17 times. I was sitting in a cafe in Plaza del Sol when I opened the email, and I had to excuse myself to the bathroom to cry. Not from sadness, From the particular panic that comes when something you thought was distant suddenly becomes immediate. When limbo ends and you have to decide if you're actually willing to live the life you said you'd live. I took a flight to New York 3 days after my release. I didn't tell him I was coming. I was operating on the theory that some things need to be felt rather than anticipated. I arrived at the address Vincent had given me, a brownstone in Brooklyn, the same kind of wealth that Dante had always surrounded himself with, and I stood outside for 20 minutes trying to calm my breathing. He answered the door like I'd been expected. He was older. Prison had aged him, in the way that consciousness does it, had carved detail into his face. His hair had gray in it. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He was smaller in the way that years spent alone can make you smaller. "Hello, Sophia," he said. The use of my real name, my original name, hit me harder than I expected. "I know I said I'd wait," I told him. "I know I wasn't supposed to come back for another 6 years. But I couldn't." I stopped. I couldn't not come back. He stepped aside to let me in. The house was austere in the way of men who've learned to live with minimal possessions. There was a living room that looked unused, a kitchen with good light, books everywhere, and then, upstairs, a bedroom that overlooked the Brooklyn rooftop landscape we'd watched together years ago. "I didn't know if you'd actually come," he said. "I prepared for the idea that you'd moved on, that you'd built a life." I did build a life, and then I realized it was the wrong one because you weren't in it. I was standing by the window, the same position I'd been in so many times before. "I'm sorry. I know that's not what you wanted to hear. I know you went to prison so I could be free." He came up beside me, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of him, the particular gravity that hadn't diminished, only intensified. "Freedom without you isn't freedom," he said quietly. "It's just absence. It's existing in a world where the only thing that mattered to me is behind glass. That's not healthy. No. But it's true." I finally turned to look at him. His eyes were exactly as I remembered that particular darkness, that capacity for absolute focus. He looked at me like I was the only real thing in a world of approximations. "I'm not what I was," I said. "Neither am I. I've done things. Things that would make the person I was 3 years ago horrified. So have I. That's not a reason to stop." When he kissed me, it was different from the roof kiss. That had been desperate. This was certain. This was the kiss of someone who'd spent 8 years imagining exactly this moment, and had finally earned the right to experience it. His hands moved carefully like he was learning me for the first time. His mouth was soft in a way I wouldn't have thought him capable of. When he pulled back, his breathing was uneven. "I'm not good at this," he said. "Normal affection. I don't know how to love someone who isn't also a mission." "Then don't. Love me the way you know how. With absolute obsession and no room for doubt?" "Exactly. We didn't talk about the future that first night. We just existed in each other's proximity, the way people do when they've been waiting for something for so long that the actual moment of arrival feels unreal." He made coffee in the morning black, 1 sugar, which made me wonder if he'd been remembering me as carefully as I'd been remembering him. "Lucia's running a foundation now," he said, "helping trafficking survivors. She asked about you. I told her you were safe. She wanted to thank you personally. I should see her. She'll be difficult. She's protective of me now." Which is funny because I'm her older brother, and I spent years thinking I was protecting her. We spent the day moving carefully around each other, learning what had changed and what hadn't. He showed me the books he'd read. I told him about Barcelona. We orbited around the larger conversation, the one about what happens next, without actually having it. That night, he asked me to stay. Not phrased as a request. Not phrased as anything. Just a statement of fact. Stay. And I did. The physical intimacy, when it finally happened, was nothing like I'd imagined during 8 years of waiting. It wasn't cinematic. It wasn't passionate in the explosive way. It was careful and tender and deeply sad in a way I didn't understand until afterward. Afterward, when he was holding me against his chest, and his heartbeat was steady and sure and real, I understood that we were grieving. We were grieving the years, the violence, the cost of getting to this moment. We were grieving the people we might have been if his sister hadn't been taken, if my boss hadn't been corrupt, if we'd met in a normal way at a normal time. "I love you," he said into my hair. "I've loved you since the moment I saw you step out of that elevator. I've loved you through everything, the violence, the prison, the waiting. I love you now." "I love you too," I said. "And I'm terrified." "Of what?" "Of the cost. Of the fact that being with you means accepting that the cost never actually stops. that there are people who want us both dead, that choosing you means choosing a life that's never going to be simple. He pulled back just enough to look at me. His expression was serious, settled. Simple is for people who haven't already been broken, he said. Simple is for people who still believe the world is safe. You and I know better. So we don't get simple, but we get true. And true is better. I believed him. I fell asleep in his arms and didn't dream of running. 3 weeks after Dante's release, Russo's family made their final move. It came not with gunfire or violence, but with paperwork. A lawsuit claiming damages from the illegal raid, illegal imprisonment, assault and battery. The lawsuit was frivolous on its face. The charges were already adjudicated. Russo was already imprisoned, but the legal action was just the cover. The actual threat came in. A note slipped under Dante's door on a Thursday morning. Your woman was in Barcelona. She worked for Moreno and Associates. She has a cat, an orange tabby, named Felix. She has a favorite cafe in Gracia where she reads on Saturday mornings. She doesn't know we know about her. But we do. And if you don't withdraw your cooperation with federal investigators, she stops being safe. Dante read it once, then handed it to me. I felt the blood drain from my face. They'd found me. They'd been watching me in Barcelona while I was thinking I was safe, thinking I was invisible. They had details. They had Felix, the cat I'd adopted in week 2. They're not going to do anything, Dante said quietly. You don't know that. I do know that, because I'm going to give them a reason not to. He spent the next 2 hours on his phone. Calls that were very brief, conversations that seemed to involve listening more than talking. By the time he was done, I could see the particular tension that meant something violent was being coordinated. What did you do? I asked. What I should have done the first time. I made the cost of continued retaliation exceed any possible benefit. Dante, don't ask. You don't want to know, and I don't want to be the person who tells you. The retaliation came on a Saturday. It wasn't against the Russo family directly. It was against their infrastructure, their money, their ability to operate. Federal agents acting on tips from anonymous sources raided their primary money laundering operations, seized assets, froze accounts. The family lost everything that made them functional as an organization. The message came via the same method as the threat. A note under the door. Your woman is safe. So is ours. We're even. Don't test us again. Dante burned the note. We didn't discuss it. We didn't talk about what he'd done or how he'd done it or who'd had to suffer for my safety to be guaranteed. We just moved on to the next moment, the next breath, the next day. Except, of course, we couldn't actually move on. Dante's parole terms were strict. No contact with known criminals, no involvement in illegal activities, regular check-ins with his parole officer. For 3 months, he followed them perfectly. He got a job at a construction company, legitimate work, legal employment. The kind of normalcy he'd said he wanted, but normalcy was killing him. I could see it. The restlessness. The way his hands would clench when he thought I wasn't looking. The way he'd go out for walks and come back smelling like cigarette smoke he'd quit years ago. He was a caged predator pretending to enjoy captivity. On day 107 after his release, he sat me down. I can't do this, he said. Do what? Pretend to be someone I'm not. Pretend to be normal. I tried. I want to be the kind of man who can exist in a regular world. But that's not who I am. And that's not fair to you, asking you to wait for me to become someone I'm not equipped to be. Are you saying you want to go back to prison? No. I'm saying I want to stop pretending I'm not going to go back. What I do, what I am, that's not compatible with staying on the straight path. Eventually, something's going to require my skills. Someone's going to need what only I can provide. And I'm going to help them. And that's going to violate my parole. I could feel tears coming but held them back. So what are you telling me? I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you that being with me means accepting that this isn't over. Being with me means potentially watching me go back to prison. It means your life is never going to be simple. It means every choice comes with a cost. I already know that. Do you? Do you really? Because you can still leave. You can still take the money and disappear. You can still build a normal life with someone normal. I thought about Barcelona. I thought about the years of waiting. I thought about the way he looked at me like I was sacred. I thought about the moment in the lobby when he'd extended his hand and said, I worked for him now. No, I said. I can't do that. I don't want to do that. Why? Because normal without you is just absence dressed up as safety. Because I love you in a way that transcends logic. Because when I imagine my future, the only future that makes sense is the one where you're in it regardless of the cost. His hand came up to my face. That same gesture from years ago, 2 inches away. The electricity between us still there after 8 years of waiting. "I'm going to hurt you," he said quietly. "Not intentionally, but inevitably. People like me hurt the people we love. I know. And I'm choosing to stay anyway." The call came 6 months later. A man. Someone we didn't know. Someone who needed help that only Dante could provide. He couldn't say no. He wouldn't say no. We both understood that moment, the moment when he had to choose between staying safe and being himself. He chose himself. The job was 3 days. It was clean. It was coordinated with enough precision that the parole officers never found out. But it was also the beginning of the inevitable trajectory that would take him back to prison. We both understood that. He sat with me on the roof that night. "It's going to happen again," he said. "Someone else will need help, and I'll help them. And eventually I'm going to get caught. I know. You deserve better than this. I deserve what I choose. And I choose this. I choose you." He took my hand. His thumb moved across my palm in a gesture I'd learned to recognize as his particular language of affection. Not words. Just touch. Just certainty. "I have a plan," he said finally. "I've been developing it for months. There's a person, someone inside the system, someone who's tired of corruption, federal investigator. They want help gathering evidence against the families, real evidence, the kind that gets prosecuted and doesn't come back to bite you." Is that what the last job was? Yes. It's the first piece of a larger operation. If I do this right, if I help bring down the actual architects of organized crime in this city, there's a possibility that my previous crimes get looked at more favorably, that a deal gets negotiated, that I don't go back to prison. And if you do it wrong, then I go back, and you wait. And when I get out again, we try once more. I understood the offer he was making. Not a guarantee, not even a promise. Just the understanding that this was what forever looked like for people like us. Cycles of danger and safety. Arrest and release. Always moving toward something. Never quite arriving. "How long?" I asked. 3 years to build the case. 1 year for trial and conviction. Release sometime in year 5. 5 years. I could do 5 years. I could do anything if I knew there was an end point. A moment of arrival. A time when we could finally stop running. "Okay," I said. "Do it." The case took exactly 3 years and 4 months to build. It was the most complex organized crime prosecution in the state's history. 12 family members arrested. 23 counts of money laundering. 30 counts of human trafficking. Wire fraud. Racketeering. The entire infrastructure of criminal enterprise came down like a tower of cards. And Dante's role in that takedown, his cooperation with federal investigators, his willingness to testify, his participation in sting operations that resulted in convictions, meant that his parole was considered satisfied. No additional prison time, no violation of terms, just a quiet acknowledgement that he'd become something other than a criminal, something closer to an instrument of justice. The moment he walked out of the courthouse the final time, he came straight to me. He looked older. The work had aged him. But his eyes were clear in a way they hadn't been since before his sister disappeared. They were clear because the debt had been paid. The cycle had been broken. "We did it," he said simply. "We did. I'm out, actually out, not on probation, not under surveillance, clean." I didn't believe him. I wasn't sure belief was possible anymore, but I let him hold me anyway. I let him be the thing he'd always wanted to be, just a man, holding a woman, in a moment of victory. "What happens now?" I asked. He pulled back just enough to look at me. His expression was soft in a way I'd come to recognize as his particular vulnerability. The part of himself he only showed me. "Now," he said, "we figure out what it means to be normal. Now we build a life that doesn't require we break laws to keep each other alive. Now we try to be something more than just damage control and careful violence. Is that possible? I don't know. But I'd like to try. With you. If you're willing." I thought about the woman I was 8 years ago. The one who got fired in public and watched a dangerous man extend his hand. I thought about the versions of myself I'd inhabited since then. I thought about all the choices that had led to this moment. "Yes," I said. "I'm willing." He kissed me there, in the courthouse hallway, with lawyers and prosecutors and federal agents walking past. He kissed me like he was finally learning how to be gentle, like he was finally understanding that some victories don't require violence. When he pulled away, he smiled. A real smile, the kind I'd only seen fragments of across years of danger and separation. "Then let's go home," he said. "Let's finally go home." We walked out of the courthouse together, his hand in mine. The gravity between us settled into something that felt like peace. It wouldn't last forever. People like us don't get forever in the way that normal people do. But we got this moment. We got the understanding that some loves burn too hot to sustain forever, and that's okay. It's enough. It has to be enough. As we stepped into the afternoon light, I realized that the worst day of my life, the day I got fired, had become the beginning of the life I actually wanted. Sometimes breaking is the only path to wholeness. Sometimes the most dangerous man is the only one who can save you. Sometimes love looks like violence, because that's the only language some people know how to speak. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it transforms into something else entirely, something that might last.